Hello and welcome back to Politics Joe. Ava and I are going to digest a frankly insane day in Parliament today, and seeing as you like the one we did the other day discussing the BBC and my appearance on Laura Kuenssberg, we thought we'd do a little reload. I mean, today we have had PMQs, the worst Prime Minister in modern history lying through his back teeth in front of the Privileges Committee, Rishi Sunak's published his tax returns, a vote on the Windsor Framework, and also a select committee from Baroness Casey discussing the shit show that is the Metropolitan Police. So, we've got loads to get through. Let's get straight into it.
People are fed up to the back teeth with a government that never takes responsibility and just tries to blame everyone. They can shout if they're proud of the fact that over 98% of rapists are never put before. If they want to shout about that, that's their record. Let them shout about it. You should be ashamed of yourself. The truth is simple. After 13 years of Tory government, crime is out of control and people are paying the price. Before Christmas, the BBC reported the shocking case of a woman in Armthorpe who'd been beaten with a baseball bat by burglars 3 years ago. Nobody had been charged with that burglary and she couldn't sleep at night. Under their watch, tragically, that's not an unusual case. So can the Prime Minister tell us what's the charge rate for theft and burglary across the country?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, actually, since 2019, neighbourhood crime is down by 25%. But he asked rightly about what's happening with rape cases. So let me just tell him that we are on track to meet our target of doubling the number of rape cases that are reaching our courts. Since the Rape Review Action Plan was published, we've seen police referrals double. We've seen charges double. And last year, there was a 65% increase in rape convictions.
Yes.
But importantly, we also changed the law to ensure that rapists would spend more time in prison. But what did his shadow policing minister say? Prison doesn't prevent crime. It tells you everything that you need to know about the Labour Party. You can't trust them to keep Britain safe.
Ava, that was Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak clashing in the House of Commons today. You spoke about this as well, actually, didn't you, on 5 Live? How was that with Naga Munchetty?
Yeah, it was very good. But, I mean, it totally blindsided me because I did not think that was what Keir was going to open with today. I mean, it's on the same day that we found out inflation had gone up by 0.3%. So it means that, you know, people around the country are still paying an extortionate amount for their food and veg, their rent, their mortgages, all of that. I was really surprised that he opened on this.
Yeah, we'll get to that point as well because I definitely want to talk about that. The thing that was revealing, interesting to me about that clip was the kind of braying from the Tory benches at the beginning when Starmer was talking about I can't think of the adjectives to describe how bad the rape conviction rate is in this country. It is 1.6%, isn't it?
Appalling, yeah.
And it's quite revealing about Westminster, I think, or kind of the paucity of our national debate, that whilst he's talking about that, he's kind of getting booed, jeered from the benches opposite him.
And also, I don't know what stat he pulled, but if you look at Q1, so moving from 22 to 23, rape prosecutions have actually gone down by 6%.
Because
that was the CPS own figure.
Rishi Sunak said that they'd increased by 65%, I think, in that clip, didn't he?
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, which is really bizarre. So I think talking about crime is really interesting because you can cherry pick your statistics and you can kind of massage figures a little bit. Like that neighbourhood crime being down 25%, that comment he made, well, there's a difference between, like, you know, causation and correlation. I mean, over the last couple of years, people have been working from home. They're a lot more present in their houses. So, yeah, burglaries have gone down because burglary has actually moved online. There's a lot more, considerable more online fraud than we used to have. And yet, crime is now not breaking into someone's homes and stealing their television.
I wonder what you think as well more broadly about the political consequences for the Labour Party pursuing the Tories on crime. I know, obviously, the classic Blair line, tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. Do you think it could pay off for Labour to kind of try and steal the Tories' thunder? You know, traditionally, you would associate that sort of law and order, slightly more authoritarian politics with the right. What's Labour up to there?
Do you think maybe it's part of the culture war? Because you could argue it's, the Tories are going after your children aren't safe in school, they're being taught about sexual education. Labour are going after you're not safe on your streets, it's dangerous out there, and we're going to protect you, the Tories won't.
Yeah, I guess it plays into that. I know it's a bit of a stereotype, but like fund the NHS, hang the pedos, election thing where it's like, when we talk about Britain as whether it's conservative or liberal, and I think those two terms are actually kind of useless to describe it at this point, but if you were, you'd kind of say, well, actually, I think Britain economically is kind of to the left in the kind of the national adoration. I think the closest thing we obviously have to a religion is like the NHS, right? But actually, it's pretty conservative when it comes to social issues like crime.
Yeah, no, definitely it is. Yeah, it's just quite an obvious thing to bring out on the doorstep, isn't it? That, you're not safe and we'll protect you. It's just so obvious. But, one of the proposals that Keir put forward today during PMQs, I thought was really interesting. And it pulls on a line that Dame Casey, who was the woman who wrote the report that came out yesterday on the Met, which is that if you are a woman who has been murdered in London, you will have the best team on you. Like, they will find that murderer, they will trace it, it's excellent. But if you're a woman who is assaulted or, sexually or just physically, the team that you're given are basically just kind of local police who are sort of like starting on like 29k. They're not very well trained, they're not very good. And what Keir is calling for is specialist force, resources inside them, so that if you're murdered, you'll get the same treatment as if you're assaulted. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I actually think that policy is pretty good if they enact it.
I think as well, the thing I'd be slightly concerned about if I was a Labour advisor, if you feed that beast, if you feed authoritarian sentiment, I think eventually you run the risk of it getting away from you and eventually consuming you, and if it's not you, then it'll be whoever the next Labour leader is.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the job of a leader to kind of cater to people's most base instincts. I think it's the job of a leader to set out a vision and then move people towards you. I don't think it's your job to listen to focus groups and think, oh yeah, well, people are actually pretty anti-nonces, so we're gonna introduce the death penalty for them. It's your job, whatever your view is, I don't know if you're the Labour leader on crime, if you think being more compassionate, regardless of whether people think differently to you, it's your job to make the case for it and convince people that the way you see it is the way it should be, not to just follow what people already think.
Yeah, but I mean, he is the former director of public prosecutions, isn't he? And he's kind of leaning into that role.
Yeah. Oh, I haven't heard him talk about that before, actually.
Yeah.
And his dad was a toolmaker, I think.
But do you not think it's interesting that he's trying to own that now?
Yeah.
Before it was a line that was used by Boris Johnson to chastise him over the Jimmy Savile case. It was like a jibe, and now Keir's trying to own it and be like, well, I actually was really tough on crime when I was director, and I'll do that again as Prime Minister.
There is an implication, isn't there, if because there was a line in PMQs where Starmer said, not personally, but I prosecuted X number of rapists or whatever when I was DPP. And that's interesting because if you are assuming personal responsibility for that, then obviously it follows, are you then going to assume personal responsibility for not prosecuting Savile? That's kind of the follow of the logic, right?
Yeah, and the same logic can be applied to Rishi Sunak. So when he's saying under the Conservative government, neighbourhood crime is down, we've had all these successes in policing, but then when Dame Louise Casey says that the Met is institutionally racist, you say, well, that's not our problem, that's the Mayor of London's problem. So it's like you either absorb all of the responsibility or none of it.
Shock.
Yeah.
Alison McGovern, point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for accepting the point of order. Just now, the Prime Minister, in response to a question about his pretence that living standards are getting better in this country, replied that he is halving inflation on the very day that we have found out that inflation is in fact rising. So could I ask you, Mr. Speaker, as you said on this important day for this House, could I ask you how the Prime Minister can correct the record?
As the Honourable knows, and I know, she does know the answer to that. What I would say is she's actually put it on the record what the situation is.
I mean, it's really egregious, isn't it, that he was allowed to say that?
Yeah, I mean,
in Parliament.
For sure. And I just, before we get into it, you're right. It's like, oh yeah, we're halving inflation. It's gone up today. Come on, man.
Yeah, and when your former Prime Minister, your predecessor, is going on trial at a select committee hearing over lying later that day, or misleading the House, the House, you're going to stand up and mislead the House. It's farcical.
Yeah, I almost as farcical. Every time the MPs do this, they make this whenever someone says point of order, you know it's not going to be a point of order. It has nothing to do with the processes of the Commons. That was it Kate Osborne who asked the question to Sunak about inflation? Yeah. Yeah,
Labour's Kate Osborne, who is the MP of Jarrow, for Jarrow.
Yeah.
She raised it, and she said that her constituents were facing, they were having trouble paying for their food. And it's true, everyone, it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, you've noticed that your food shop is considerably more expensive than it used to be. And the knock-on effect of that has actually been on our hospitality sector, which I talked about last time. I will not rest. It is the third biggest sector in this country, and it is not taken seriously at all on a government level. Like, the amount of people who are employed by that are totally just like, nothing to the government. But, food prices means that restaurants are more expensive to run. They're also suffering from energy prices. And now you're actually seeing a lot of restaurants are closing.
When Sunak announced that, was it his pledge or mission? I can't remember which of them said which was. Keir's missions and Rishi's were, I can't remember whether they were, whatever. It was, the first one is, we will halve inflation.
Yeah.
And if you look at what the Bank of England was forecasting at the time he made that promise, it was forecasting that inflation would halve before the end of this year. And so I thought, oh, okay, well, that's quite clever because they think that's what's going to happen anyway. You don't have to particularly have to do much to achieve it. It is interesting that it's not going down. And I wonder whether he's going to get into a bit of sticky. It would be ironic if he got into trouble over this, pledging to basically do something that he thought was a near on certainty. And actually turns out it doesn't happen, and he doesn't have the power to make it happen.
But you don't need to be an economist to explain why it hasn't gone down. Really, we should have seen it coming because your energy bills haven't gone down. The price of food has not gone down. Actually, we just had a month where we couldn't get tomatoes into supermarkets. So there's no clear indicator of why it should have decreased.
Another clip.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give for this committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you very much.
It's like it should be a scene from The Omen. Do you know in The Omen when he's driving up to the cathedral and he just starts panicking and he's like the Bible to me should have just set on fire, just like
immediately combusts as soon as it comes into contact with the very being,
or become pregnant.
It's revealing because not everyone who gives evidence to a select committee has to give that oath.
Oh, really?
For sure. When I interviewed Darren Jones the other day, he was saying, they if they're worried about the
no way.
Yeah, if they're worried about the quality of the testimony that's going to be provided, they can ask them to take an oath so that it's like.
That is an unbelievable tidbit.
Yeah. So they've obviously asked him to swear an oath, which is extraordinary. Because we're talking about a former prime minister, someone who, if you look at our cast of recent prime ministers, then maybe it's not that a pantheon of heroes. But you're talking about a recent prime minister who his colleagues, he's still a serving MP, doubt the veracity of his testimony so strongly that they're asking him to take an oath beforehand. I saw a tweet from the secret barrister that was like, you would expect if in like a criminal defence trial that whoever is in the dock, the defendant, if they're guilty, is going to lie through their teeth to try and get through it. And we kind of have this absurd sight of a man who's being tried for lying through his teeth to try and get through it. And I think as we get into the rest of these clips, you'll see that no matter whether or not he held the Bible, it didn't have much of a bearing on what happened afterwards.
The obligation not to mislead Parliament is a very serious obligation on any member of Parliament, let alone a minister. And it requires the MP or the minister to take due care, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So I have to say, if I was accused of law breaking and I had to give undertakings to the House of Commons, of all places, that I had not broken the law, I would want the advice of a lawyer. I would want the advice of somebody really independent and capable? And you didn't ask the Cabinet
Sorry,
Secretary.
can I interrupt you for 10 seconds?
Yes.
I wasn't accused of law breaking. I was asked to say what had gone on at a party or an event
but if I was asked to give
in the media room on the
Okay,
18th
the
of
same
December
point of
2020.
If I was asked to give undertakings that rules and guidance had been followed, and there was any doubt about it, there was the most thinnest scintilla of doubt about it, well, you'd want to copper plate your assurances by showing that you'd taken proper advice.
Perhaps
And
I
I
can-
put it to you, Mr. Johnson, you did not take proper advice.
Can I respond first by saying that if you look at what I said on December the 1st, you have to. It is true, as Mr. Carter said, that I had expected something like that question to come up, but actually, I thought that the leader of the opposition would not bother with that story. For his main line of
that's
questions.
irrelevant.
It is relevant.
The
because
question is, why did you not take proper advice?
Sorry. The answer is quite simply that over the, and I've tried to describe what I felt about these events as they were happening. Nobody raised with me or had any concern before I stood up on December the 1st about those events.
You did not ask.
I did say, this is complete nonsense. I mean, complete nonsense. I asked the relevant people. They were senior people. They'd been working very hard. They gave Jack Doyle gave me a clear account of what had happened.
The Cabinet Secretary.
How the Cabinet Secretary wasn't there? Sorry, you're wrong, because I did ask the Cabinet Secretary. And I did ask the Cabinet Secretary to conduct an inquiry on the 7th of December.
I think Bernard Jenkins, if he hadn't interrupted him when he did, I think you might have got quite a fascinating answer out of him there. I think he was about to say something on the lines of, Keir, I didn't think that the leader of the opposition was going to bring it up because I thought it was a non-story, which is basically an admission of guilt. Because it's like, I think you would have got more out of him.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because actually, I take your point. I think Bernard Jenkins was actually one of the most effective people on that panel of MPs.
Yeah, but there wasn't much to choose from.
I know, I know. I mean, as someone who works in political journalism, when you look at the names of the people on the list, and you go, I don't know who that fucking is.
No.
Bon, the guy from the SNP, Alan Dorrans, Andy Carter.
Most boring man.
A lot of them were pretty boring.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we tuned in because we were wanted to see a blockbuster. I mean, we did, but that's not the reason. But I actually just don't think the line of questioning was that effective. I think they got stuck in this ring of Boris Johnson saying, yes, I did mislead the House, but I followed all of the guidance. And we just kind of kept going on this sort of like infinity loop back and forward. No one quite managed to get in there.
Yeah, they tied him down. His argument was essentially that it was essential for these people to be thanked and for these events to take place, and that he didn't knowingly mislead because the guy he'd asked people for advice and whether or not the things that had happened had been inappropriate, and then it transpires, as Bernard Jenkins was questioning him there, that the people that advised him weren't senior civil servants, weren't lawyers. It was the head of comms who was president of the party. And it was interesting to see. Johnson started getting angry during Jenkins questioning him, and I don't know whether that was because they used to kind of find themselves on the same side of the Brexit divide, that during those kind of febrile 2018, 2019 times when Johnson was basically courting the ERG of which Jenkins was a part, maybe there was like a degree of, he was angry that he felt that Jenkins should still be loyal to him. I've been quite impressed with watching Jenkins on the select committees, to be honest with you. I think he's doing a pretty good job.
I don't know if he was getting annoyed at him because of the camaraderie or the assumed camaraderie. I think that he felt like a man who was beneath him was speaking to him in a way that he didn't appreciate. I think it was quite public school and telling. It was almost like, why is this little man speaking to me? Does he not know who I am?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I wonder whether that reaction from him would have been exaggerated if instead of Bernard Jenkins it was a woman doing that to him.
Yeah, well, do you know, this is what I was thinking earlier. I thought he would have actually exploded more under Harriet Harman because he really cannot speak to women. Do you remember when it was... Did Angela Rayner stand in on Prime Minister's questions? And he really showed himself up. He kind of became really infuriated and his temperament was just completely out the window.
Dismissive, yeah.
He just does not know how to be told no by a woman, I would argue.
Revealing.
If it was obvious to me that these events were contrary to the guidance and the rules, then it must have been equally obvious to dozens of others, including the most senior officials in the country, all of them, most of them like me, responsible for drawing up the rules, and it must have been obvious to others in the building, including the current Prime Minister. On the contrary, the overwhelming evidence which you have assembled is that these individuals believed that the rules and the guidance were being complied with. And what is so telling is the number of officials who say the same thing and the total silence of the written or electronic record about concerns that anyone wanted to raise with me. It would be one thing if the committee had come here today and said, look, here are the emails or here are the WhatsApps that show that you were warned about rule breaking before you made your statements to the House. You haven't got any such evidence because that never happened. But if you now say instead that it must have been obvious that we were going against the rules and the guidance, then let's be clear about what you are saying. You're not only accusing me of lying, you're accusing all those civil servants, advisors, MPs, of lying about what they believed at the time to be going on. And as far as I know, you're not giving any of them the chance to explain themselves with their own oral evidence. I don't think you seriously mean to accuse those individuals of lying, and I don't think you can seriously mean to accuse me of lying.
I really enjoyed that little cutaway as Harriet Harman tries to keep a smirk from coming across her face. Because as Johnson essentially tries to drag the entire civil service down with him, she can't believe it, and then also perhaps is a little bit amused at his comments directed at her as well.
Yeah. It's fascinating to see him suddenly get concerned about the civil service when, when they've spent, the best part of 2 years denigrating it, calling it full of lefty liberals and all sorts. But, even the people at the party, the garden party that was held, a lot of junior women were, according to Dominic Cummings, told to attend the Bring Your Own Booze event. And then when it all, when it all went on fire, the women were forced to pay the fines. Boris Johnson didn't have to pay one, and they were the ones thrown under the bus.
Yeah.
He had no concern for them at all. Suddenly, they're right in the boat with him.
The extraordinary thing as well, in that same opening statement, Johnson says that Cummings has basically an ulterior motive to lie and that his evidence, should be disregarded. And it's kind of like, I wonder else who has an ulterior motive to lie about what's happening right here. Yeah. Could it also possibly be you, Boris?
And he would like that to be in the public perception, that to be Sue Gray. That's what he wanted. She didn't really come up, actually, at all. I thought he was going to lay more blame at her door.
Yeah, I think he tried to, and then Jenkin and Harman in her opening remarks as well, they both said, Jenkins said, ironically, we're not actually using Sue Gray's evidence. I think it was smart of them. I don't know whether they had an inside track on it, but they did their own evidence collection, which means they weren't reliant on Sue Gray. So obviously what's come out since about her and Keir Starmer and her becoming his chief of staff kind of insulates them from that.
I am confused, though, some of the evidence that was supplied, they had still blurred out, they pixelated people who were in the photos. I actually don't know why that is. Why do they get their privacy protected like that?
Yeah, and some people who didn't get their privacy protected, I won't say the names, but Johnson actually doxed two of the people that were involved, which he claimed was an accident, but
after being specifically told, do not do this.
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty obvious what he was doing. It's kind of it's an implicit threat against anyone else who could potentially give evidence, isn't it? That it's like, I'll just say your name in Parliament, so, deal with it. Bullying.
You were there at the time, so it's a bit hard to understand what the nature of an assurance is when you have been there and seen it with your own eyes. If I was going at 100 miles an hour and I saw the speedometer saying 100 miles an hour, it would be a bit odd, wouldn't it, if I said, somebody assured me that I wasn't, because it's what you've seen with your own eyes.
Yeah, with the greatest
so do you
respect.
actually think that we would be entitled to be a bit dismayed about the flimsy nature of this assurance when we took it at face value that these assurances amounted to something, and it looks from what you've told us in answer to Mr. Costa's questions that they did not amount to much at all?
Do you find it confusing, this kind of weird weaving, and like it just almost feels like kind of like obfuscation, like it just feels like it's intentional? Because I'm watching this and I'm getting really confused in my head. I'm going like, well, what date is what and who was where when, and you know, I mean, some of the conversation about going through the flat and trying to work out if he could see certain gatherings, and I'm just a bit lost.
Yeah, I think it's Rory Stewart who said that that Johnson may be the best liar we've ever seen in British public life, and that he has 100 different ways to lie. And I think that's what you're seeing there. Harman says the point she's making at that 100-mile-an-hour speedometer is like, it doesn't matter whether someone assured you or not that the guidelines were being followed. You saw what was happening. You were there. You saw the people drinking. You know, there's another moment where Johnson says, in relation to sort of what precautions were being taken, yeah, we weren't touching the same pens. And it's like, yeah, but you were passing drinks around.
Yeah.
You're pouring out bottles of Prosecco and passing them around the room. So like, how are the two? And it depends what you're talking about, but in that instance, you know, she's saying to him, you saw it with your own eyes, and he's like, well, I wasn't there, but she's not talking about the event that he wasn't there, obviously.
Yeah.
It's just...
That's the darting around that is really confusing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a deliberate tactic to distract. If you're on murky territory, move the conversation or try and move the area of inquisition away to something that you're more confident on.
Well, it worked on me.
I fell for it. Fuck! I think that might be it for us on the Privileges Committee.
Do you want to do a little bit about the vote?
Yeah, we'll do the vote and Rishi, but we don't have clips for that, so we'll just talk about them.
Yeah.
So during that committee hearing, the Prime Minister took the opportunity to publish his tax returns. I can't fathom for the life of me why he would choose to do that literally in the middle of that evidence hearing.
Well, quite. Isn't it fascinating though when it came out? I suppose it wasn't quite the bombshell I was expecting. I don't know what I thought. I thought I was going to open it up and I was going to, like, there was going to be like big red letters from HMRC being like, tax due or something. But it was actually a small amount compared to his familial wealth.
Yeah.
His wife is wealthier than the Queen. And this woman is bringing in money to the estate. I mean, hundreds of millions. They're worth like 150 million more than King Charles. Comparatively, he brought in 4 million over the past 4 years, or 3 years, sorry, excuse me. Do you think there's like a conversation at home where it's like, he's kind of like, he just gets to go off and do his like little politics job? And have like,
don't worry, mummy's making the money.
Do you know what I mean?
I'll have the strap-on lubed up when you get
Yeah,
out.
yeah. And she's like the non-dom.
Apart from when they're in the bedroom,
quite.
the dom. Yeah, I mean, what was it, 1.9 million this last year just gone, made, and something like 400 grand in tax paid.
Yeah.
It's obviously, we were joking about it, but the strategy is clear. It's like big news day. There was something else on there as well, Brexit trade deal that they published.
Yeah.
You were talking about Australia
there
or something?
There was a debate going on in Parliament about scrutinising the Australia trade framework. It's pretty big.
Yeah,
It's like one of our biggest, I mean, it's actually pretty small, but it's one of the biggest trade agreements that we've signed after Brexit. So it's pretty important to have a look at, what Tim Tams are coming in, what lamb's going out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so, they used the opportunity to sort of get the bad news out. The other, I guess, very major piece of parliamentary business as well was the vote on the Stormont break for the Windsor framework.
Yeah, and which would have been a huge story had Boris Johnson not been actually in the middle of his opening statement to the Privileges Committee, him going off to vote against the Windsor framework that Rishi Sunak has put down. And I actually I think it would lack nuance if we said he only voted against Rishi Sunak's Northern Ireland framework because he was trying to be mischievous or he was trying to, mess it up. I actually think he went against it for valid reasons. I don't think the way that this framework will operate is best told through sausages. Essentially, if you're selling sausages in Northern Ireland, this framework stipulates that the rules on sausages have to be the same in the EU as the UK. It basically means if the EU decide to change how they want to sell sausages in the next coming years, either the UK has to change the way that they sell sausages or Northern Ireland becomes an outlier. So what this framework actually does is align us with EU regulations for the rest of time. And if we don't align ourselves with EU regs, then we invalidate the Good Friday Agreement. Is this really boring?
No,
Sorry.
not at all. I'm listening.
My sausage alignment boring. But what Johnson is saying is that it doesn't work. It means in the next couple of years, if they change the rules on light bulbs, we're suddenly having to overhaul all of our legislation. So it's not Brexit. That's what he's arguing.
I guess the alternative, and it's the one that he clearly doesn't care about because he sold the DUP and the Unionists down the river, is that if you don't do that, as those changes come into sausages and light bulbs, Northern Ireland just becomes increasingly divergent from the rest of the UK.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's not a good piece of legislation. And before anyone says that I'm pro-Brexit or pro-Johnson or anything like that, I'm not. I'm just laying out the fundamentals.
It's extraordinary when you sort of take all these pieces and you put them together. Basically, I think don't call it a comeback, but I think we're witnessing the end of certainly Johnson's political credibility, maybe not necessarily his career, in that in the Privileges Committee hearing. You've then got the rebellion against the Windsor Framework, which is basically limited to about actual no votes. I think it was 22 Conservative MPs. There are about another 30 or 40 who were away, and the reporting seems to indicate that the whips were giving out slips for any Tom, Dick and Harry to basically not have to vote no. But there were some no votes, small, admittedly. You're talking about your Boris's, Liz Truss, the kind of Johnson fanboys like Gullis, and then I think it was Ian Duncan Smith as well, was sort of one of the other big names there. I think they'll actually be pretty happy with the size of that rebellion. They had the Labour votes, it was going to carry anyway. It's smaller than I think people were expecting. You got Johnson collapsing and also Keir Starmer. I mean, there was a poll from Delta Polling out yesterday, I think it was, and it's only one poll, so there is that caveat, that narrowed the polling lead to 10 points for Labour. I think Rishi Sunak might be putting his feet up at the end of today and thinking, we've had a pretty good day in the trenches.
Yeah, not too bad at all. He must have been so relieved when Starmer started on that.
Yeah.
At PMQ, starting on the Dame Casey report. It's so easy for the Tories to deflect and blame it all on the Labour Mayor of London. He must have been like, what a day.
That was interesting, wasn't it? Because that was one of the findings of the report, that the relationship between the Mayor and the Met is dysfunctional. That's a quote.
But it also said that the relationship between the Home Secretary, the Tory Home Secretary, and the Met was complacent. So that advice kept being given to the Home Office, and they've just decided not to implement it, and that's why we're still in the problems that we are in now.
PoliticsJOE's own Ed Campbell was watching the Select Committee, so I'm going to watch some clips with him now. I'm going to clap my hands, and he'll appear where you're sat right now. Holy fuck, it's Ed Campbell! Jesus Christ! I told you I was magic.
Yeah, how'd I get here?
I know. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing well, how are you?
Good, thank you. Obviously, it's been a busy day in Parliament, and sort of Ed, myself, Ava and Sean were watching Boris and the Privileges Committee, and every so often I'd hear you just kind of like go, oh my God, as you were on the Casey Committee, the other massive thing that was happening in Parliament today. So give us your top line thoughts about what happened in that committee hearing.
So obviously, it was a committee in looking at Baroness Casey's landmark report in which she's judged the Metropolitan Police to be not only institutionally racist, but it's now institutionally sexist. Which is just shocking to go with all the...
Yeah. I mean, with the Met Police, I do get this feeling, the Stephen Lawrence inquiry finds the Met institutionally racist. That is getting on for 30 years now? Following the Daniel Morgan murder, I've forgotten the name of the actual report, but that found the Met Police to be institutionally corrupt again, decades ago. And seemingly nothing's changed.
I think actually the most important point that Casey was making in this report, one of the members of the committee, Adam Holloway, he said, surely the officers in this, the officers would feel quite bad that they're being called institutionally racist when they're not. But she makes the point, no, they are. we have evidence for this. We spent time with the Met. We have evidence. This is not conjecture in any way. She's so clear that the Met police officers treat the public badly, they treat each other badly, and all of that is just compounded by the institutional racism, sexism, homophobia, every single like form of bigotry is just compounded by, it's not just one bad apple. It's like, they're a horrible, horrible apple tree, and like, they should be like cut down at the root.
Burned.
Scorched earth policy to apples when it comes to the...
Death to apples.
When it comes to the Met Police.
So we'll watch a clip of that, shall we?
Yeah, let's.
I mean, it's wonderful to see such extraordinary energy and perception over this thing. This is a genuine question. I look around here and we've got loads of cops in Parliament and so on, and if I was them being told that they were somehow institutionally racist, I think I'd be quite upset. I mean, I can't speak to the procedures and protocols that you referred to, but in terms of the men and women in the Metropolitan Police Service, why do you say it's institutionally racist? Because the vast, 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 vast majority of them are not. So it really is a question. Why do you say that?
I think, dare I say, that I've had it in the last couple of days that people have referred to sort of, you're very powerful, you're very emotional. And don't think for a moment that behind this is a very steely, determined weight of evidence. So I can tell you, without any conjecture, that almost 50% of black police officers in the Metropolitan Police experience racism. That's evidenced. It's not conjecture, it's not anything else. I can tell you all of those statistics. I can tell you, for example, that and you should worry about this as a Home Affairs Select Committee, that in 95% of cases in the Metropolitan Police of police-perpetrated domestic violence, only 95% proceed. And also, can I really come to this issue of institution and the word institutional? McPherson did not say that, in fact, he almost, I think, gifted the Metropolitan Police at that time, because he said it's not that anybody is individually racist, it is that the organisation is institutionally racist. And that really, in a way, is saying that your procedures and your systems are institutionally racist, rather than suggesting that any officer individually was racist. What I'm saying is actually worse than that. I am saying that we have homophobic, sexist and racist police officers serving in the Metropolitan Police Service, many of whom are regularly in the newspapers at the moment for misconduct complaints. And at the same time, I am saying that they treat each other very poorly with prejudice, and on top of that, there is institutional, systemic and organisational bias.
That question from Adam Holloway there was really revealing to me, because I think there is a gap between perceptions and views of the police in society, and it's basically class-based. Mm-hmm. If you are an MP, a police officer is someone, usually with a gun, standing at the front of Parliament, someone like PC Keith Palmer, for example, who literally dies defending Parliament from attack. If you are a normal person and you have anything stolen, if you get assaulted, if you are sexually harassed, and you go to the police, they basically work as a verification service for insurance. They basically give you a crime number, and then you go to your insurance and say, yeah, my bike got stolen. They say, have you got a crime number? You say, yes, I do. They check with the police and they go, okay, here's the value of your bike. They don't actually investigate what's happened to your bike. Now, this isn't a vendetta from me because someone stole my bike, which they did.
We're launching the campaign.
Yeah,
bring back all these bikes.
We're going to fuck these guys up. But I think it's revealing that he basically says, you know, fucking Jeff over there is not racist.
But it's also, how the hell would Adam Holloway know that?
Yeah.
Because, you know, if he's being racist, he's not being racist to Adam Holloway. He's an old white guy. There's no... I think people's perception of racism in police is so black and white in that, no, the police are good. The police are goodies because we should treat people to grow up to respect law and order, respect the police. They can help you and they will help you, and that's what they're designed to do. When was the last time that was actually true for everyone in this country, that they could go to the police and be expect to be treated with expect like a positive outcome for an investigation, and it's the discourse surrounding these issues is like just miles behind. Like we were made to point earlier, there's report after report after report on the institutional failures of the Met Police. There was I don't know his name, but there was a Met Police commissioner in the 70s who was brought in to kind of like root up corruption within the Met, and he described it as coming. So I think he came from the Leicestershire Police Force or Leicester's Police Service, and he described it as coming from like a leper colony into like a colonial outpost. Like that was how alien he felt within that service. And that was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
It's so damning. And also, which I thought was quite damning, I didn't get the impression that a few of the members of that select committee had read the report in its entirety.
Oh yeah, go on.
Because there was quite a few occasions where one of the members of the select committee would make a comment or point something out, and Baroness Casey would go, "That's in the report." like the leper quotes that I just, or the leper point.
Yeah.
Diane Abbott says, "I read this man from Leicester's autobiography, and he says it there." And Baroness Casey goes, "Oh, that's funny. It's in the report too." So it is a really long report. It's like 366 pages.
Yeah.
But you are the Home Affairs Select Committee.
It's kind of what you're meant to be doing.
Yeah. I think that is that not base level expectations? If that's obviously that's not, we're not here to discuss the feelings of the Home Affairs Select Committee because we'd be here all day. But I think if that's the like, just try. Come on, try.
Yeah.
Put your finger out a wee bit.
For sure. Another clip.
Yeah.
I mean, just coming to the point, I mean, this is just so staggering that if you think that David Carrick, multiple rapist, had 9 non-crime incidents between 2000 and 2019, 5 public complaints, including the one where he dragged a woman down a staircase by her throat. He got through his initial vetting in 2001. He passed his probation in 2003, despite the fact that they knew if they bothered to look, which is what Jessica did behind us on all of these cases. He passed his probation in 2003. God alone knows how. He had checks done to become a firearms officer in 2009, so we knew about the DV. You know, nobody checked, and this is what's so staggering about this organisation. And then he was re-vetted in 2016, that was delayed by 5 years. And people are saying, I'm being tough on the cops. I'm being tough. They treated those women with utter disrespect by not making sure that their systems were able to do what is common sense in another organisation. In any other organisation, that you would put 2 and 2 together. And if one of those women hadn't heard Susan Everard's victim impact statement reported in the news, it was because of her coming forward that that man was stopped. So the stakes are incredibly high.
You get David Carrick, and that follows Wayne Couzens, Sarah Everard's killer. And I know these are sort of the most high-profile cases, and not that, you know, they're people that have murdered women, they're people that have raped women, or in Carrick's case, multiple women. The point that Casey's making there, right, is it's not a few bad apples, right?
No, it's not. Well, I think there's something like 800 serving Met Police officers are currently under investigation.
I think it might be more than that.
I think it's just so disheartening to think that I was reading today, just kind of, it was like essentially a list of dreadful things that Met Police officers have done, even in the last year. Like in the last year, a 15-year-old schoolgirl was strip searched at school because they thought they had cannabis on her. Like, and that's not, and it's no comment on you, but that didn't spring to your mind because of the murder and like, the murders and rapes. Like, it's where do you even begin to start? And I think there's another really important point that Baroness Casey is making about David Carrick, is that David Carrick would likely still be at large if Sarah Everard hadn't been murdered by another police officer. Because if it was Sarah Everard's mother's victim impact statement that prompted another woman who'd been terrorised by a police officer to come forward, it's not like the police were investigating it. it's just so disheartening.
I think I honestly feel like they sort of they're intoxicated by the power they have. I think if I was to look at, this is completely anecdotal, just like conjecture by me, but if you were someone who was, let's say, bullied at school or never had much authority, wasn't particularly popular, and you discover there's a career you can go to where you basically get to tell people what to do, and you talk to an array of activists about how the police behave at protests, and without legal observers there, the kind of stuff they do, which is essentially, in some cases, fabricate outright lies in order to charge people. If you look at the Spy Cops scandal, where undercover police officers started sexual relationships with women to gather information on them, their crime was being part of environmental groups, being organising protests. In some cases, they fathered children with the women. It's mind-bending, the abuse of power that's perpetrated by these people. I'd be interested to hear what you say, but myself, definitely not, and I wouldn't advise my female friends if they felt vulnerable or in difficult situations. I wouldn't say, "Oh, is there a police officer nearby? Can you go and speak to a police officer?"
Even like, I've had very limited interactions with the police, and it's mostly been in like a professional capacity. And I found every single interaction incredibly frustrating. And I know, like in the grand scheme of things, that is so low down in the bad things that the Metropolitan Police have done, or like the police have done in general. But they're not helpful. When I've interacted with them, I've not found them to be helpful. I found them to be almost an obstacle in anything that we do. Yeah,
I've been on a few like ride-alongs when they're sort of kicking in the doors of suspected drug dealers, and the blokes that like run in and charge in and like arrest people all seem like fairly normal people. I know people on a personal level from different levels of the Met Police, and from junior to like very senior police officers, all of whom I think are like normal people. But that doesn't discount how many times is a serving Met Police officer going to be found guilty of raping someone? Like how many? For it to happen once. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And I think this is really revealing actually, because I don't think we should be applying the sort of like minimum standards of like morality that you apply to anyone in everyday life to the police force. I think they should be the example. It's like, if one police officer in 100 years rapes someone, it should be like that. There should be wide scale review, and instead you're talking about. I think in some instances, I saw someone reporting it's like more than 1,000 cases of like sexual harassment,
or you join and you put it into a WhatsApp group where someone's nickname is the rapist.
Yeah, exactly. It's thoroughly depressing, and it's clear that from top to bottom, the Met Police needs sorting out.
Yeah, bang on.